Hey Emma,
Yes, Madeline.
what do you call it when two members of a folk band sneeze simultaneously?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Banjo-Kazooie! Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
It was low-hanging fruit, but I was sitting out in the living room before the episode, and I asked my boyfriend what the joke should be, and he's like, what do you do when, like a folk musician is convicted of a crime? Guilty banjo, because all you ever do is just mash one word from each title together. I was like, well, that joke's out the window.
It's true. That is your usual strategy.
Well, folks, I'm your predictable humor, if you can call it that, host, Madeline.
I'm your doesn't tell jokes host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the show. Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving, a fruitful day of Black Friday shopping, and
Hope you ate your kazooie as a turkey.
Oh, that's dark.
I don't think kazooie is actually a turkey, but
No,
I thought
but
it was funny.
that's dark. You just said you don't tell jokes.
It's not a joke. I'm very serious.
Well, this week, the holiday theme, not at all. We're talking about Banjo-Kazooie, and we're talking about Guilty Gear Strive.
See, I don't. It's got a bird for Thanksgiving, and it's
Yes.
got fighting for Black
Thanksgiving.
Friday.
Oh,
For Thanksgiving, too. Yeah, you're right. It's very seasonal.
You're right. It's seasonal. And listeners, I have a confession. I saw all of the press about Banjo-Kazooie coming to the new expanded Switch Online that everybody is angry about. And I thought, oh, that's great. Banjo-Kazooie is on Switch Online. I'll upgrade, because whatever. Maybe I want to dabble in the new Animal Crossing thing, and I live with someone who has a childhood attachment to those Zelda games, so great. I'll upgrade, and I'll play Banjo-Kazooie. And then it was weird. I was looking at the games featured on the image when I was going to upgrade, and I was like, that's weird. Banjo-Kazooie's not on there. And then I realized that it was coming in the future, and that I was unwilling to buy a fighting game because I'm just not, it's not my genre. So here I am.
It is on sale for like $30. I was thinking that's probably still a little too expensive for Malin. If it had been $20, I might have sent it your way. Like, maybe that's worth it, but...
Well, we'll talk about a little bit how this one is perhaps more accessible to people like me. But yeah, as someone who has historically lost to like 7-year-olds at Mortal Kombat. Tekken? I don't remember
Tekken.
Tekken. That's Mortal Kombat did feel a little bloody, maybe. I didn't think that Guilty Gear was even really made for me. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that when we get there. But here I am asking your forgiveness, listeners. Again, maybe I will play Banjo-Kazooie. I enjoyed Jak and Daxter. I feel like because I played Jak and Daxter, I've basically played Banjo-Kazooie. So, I understand what it would be like.
Sure.
How about that? I watched some of it. I thought, this looks a lot like Jak and Daxter. And I felt like, okay, cool. It's probably blasphemy to have said that. Everyone's like, that's a PlayStation exclusive.
I feel like Daxter has less to do in Jak and Daxter than Kazooie does in Banjo and Kazooie, if I remember correctly.
That's true.
Daxter does not carry you around.
Daxter just makes comments.
Yeah. He's moral support.
Anyway, I guess let's dive into our lovely humor-inspiring first game, Banjo-Kazooie. So it's a 1998 game from Rare. It'd be Rareware then, right? Of course. Every company had to drop something from their name heading into the new millennium, right?
I think they should have stuck with Rareware.
It's got a nice ring to it.
It does.
And it came out originally for the N64, because this was when Rare was like a prominent second-party developer for Nintendo, pre the early aughts acquisition by Microsoft, and the henceforth Xbox-geared development from them. And in this game, we've taken Super Mario 64 and we've slapped on the requisite 2 animals, one large, one small. Sometimes it can be a robot. I see you, Ratchet and Clank. But we're going to run around and pick up stuff in the world while 3D platforming and solving some light puzzles to solve a problem in the kind of magical fantasy world.
Initially it was not this.
Correct.
Actually. It was something called Project Dream. That was a fairy tale-like RPG starring a boy named Edson who got in trouble with some pirates. So really just sort of sounds like a Peter Pan-y type thing. But it was initially being made for the SNES, but then they transitioned it to the N64, and then they were like, oh no, this is huge, this is way too big. And they had also released Conker's Bad Fur Day, which had been received really well. So I guess they were like, funny animals, but maybe less inappropriate this time, and made it into Banjo-Kazooie.
I also read that they played Super Mario 64 and they were like, ah, crap. This is what people are going to want to play.
Yeah.
Now. Like, it's too late for Project Dream. Which I guess was probably what happened in basically every game studio right about when that game came out. Everybody played it. Everyone went, ah, crap. And then started making their 2 animals running around the world game. So in Banjo-Kazooie, in this particular spin on this, it's just so weird. I just think this is such a ubiquitous genre of this era, this like late 90s, early 2000s era. And now it's like, where do you see this at all? Like almost nowhere, right?
Yeah, there's really a dearth is not very many, right?
Correct.
Okay. There's really a dearth of like just games where you play as animals now, like funny looking animals. I feel like.
Well, we've decided realism at all costs, right?
Yeah.
The kinds of studios that were making Banjo-Kazooie are now like, you must see every bead of sweat.
Like, Ratchet and Clank is the one hold on, really. And then, like, the, like, remasters or remakes, like the Crash Bandicoot ones, for instance.
Right.
But you don't really see any new IPs that are, like, funny animal and his smart talking friend in his backpack, you know?
Well, maybe we'll talk a little bit about Yooka-Laylee at the end of this, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
But that is functionally a Banjo and Kazooie sequel, and it was not that well received. So
I've heard that the second one was received better, but was not very commercially done because the first one was not received very well.
Right. It's a shame because I really enjoyed my experience with Jak and Daxter a lot more earlier this year than I thought I would. And I also think, so Banjo-Kazooie, which I will explain the plot of in a minute, but, you know, you run around and you pick stuff up, and you're a bear, and your friend's a bird. But Banjo-Kazooie, they really explicitly designed to appeal to all ages and be a game that could be played by people of all ages. And I actually think both games this week tie kind of nicely into last week's side quest. So nice job, Emma, with that thematic synergy.
Nice.
But I think games like Banjo-Kazooie and these, you know, platformer light action-adventure games of this era are actually probably a great entry point for gamers who aren't willing to start at the very beginning. Right? Like, if you don't have to start someone off with, like, Tetris or Pong, a game like Banjo-Kazooie, not a bad way to start.
Yeah.
Anyway, in this game, the witch Gruntilda, frequently referred to as Grunty, believes that she is the fairest in all the land, despite being stereotypically witchy-looking. But her assistant tells her that, titular character Banjo's sister Tootie, is supposed to be prettier and nicer than her to boot. You'd
think that would be, like, a good trade-off. It's like, she's prettier than you, but also her name is Tootie, so, like, it's all fair, you know? It's all balanced.
Grunty is pretty bad, too.
I guess so.
It's
if
not
people,
as bad as Tootie.
She could have tried to make an image change to, like, Tilda. Tilly. But if people did insist on calling you Grunty no matter what, I can see how I would end up a grumpy old witch.
Well, we'll try it out on you and see how it goes.
Alright.
Anyway, Grunty, who is a witch, cannot stand there being someone more beautiful than her in the world, because witches just are not well adjusted enough to do that. And so she captures young bear Tootie, and she's going to use her in some kind of witchy magical contraption, which, like, read to me like the machine from The Princess Bride, right? It's going to, like, suck her beauty away to make Grunty more beautiful. And so Banjo and his good friend Kazooie find out this has happened, and they're going to rescue Tootie from Gruntilda by going through a bunch of these kind of, like, magical worlds on the way to her lair.
The part that I thought was funniest, and spoilers, I guess, for Banjo-Kazooie, is they initially do get Tootie back by doing, like, a trivia contest type thing in Gruntilda's lair. And they get her back, and they're, like, having a party because they got her back. And Tootie's like, no, go kill that witch, basically. She's like, you may have got me back, but the witch got away, and I want you to go drop a boulder on her right now.
And lo and behold, they do.
It's just like it's like a funny little, I have no idea how it plays out, like, in the actual game, because I was just reading it, but it's like, there's just a funny little beat. It's like, we did it, and then Tootie's like, no, go murder her. Good
for Tootie. Stand up for yourself. Get witches like Grunty off the streets.
Yeah.
So, you know, as you progress through this world, it's the usual kind of, like, you're jumping up on stuff, and you're picking up various collectibles, including puzzle pieces that are called jiggles. There's, like, all these little honeycomb things that you can pick up. Lots and lots of, like, a collect-a-thon of stuff in this game that makes up the bulk of your gameplay. And they really did add Kazooie in there because they wanted to justify a double jump. Which I think is so funny. They were just like, how do we make it so this bear can double jump?
It's so funny that they had to justify it. Like, just make it double jump.
Well, everyone knows that the only creatures that have the ability to double jump naturally are Italian plumbers.
I guess so. I mean, in Elden Ring now, horses double jump, which is truly the newest innovation in gaming, I think. So
Why not? Why not have a double jumping horse?
I expect all games with horses to now allow them to double jump. I just think it's the new thing.
I'm glad the backlash against double jumping then has ended. I feel like there were a couple years where people were like, double jumping is bad game design.
Why? It's so fun.
Oh, it breaks the realism.
It's so satisfying to double jump. It doesn't make any sense, but it's so fun.
Look, I just feel like I read a couple articles that were like, double jumping is bad. And I was like, really? This is the thing that's bad? Oh, well.
Someone was really, really upset about the physics of it.
Well, and a big win for restrictions making things better. Also, so the game was like originally going to be called Banjo. Well, it was originally going to be Project Dream, and then maybe it was going to be Banjo, and then they added, then named Kazoo, right? So it was going to be Banjo-Kazoo. But, and I feel like this happens a lot in games history, right? Or at least enough times that I've noticed that it's a thing that has happened several times, that Banjo-Kazoo was going to be somewhat difficult to trademark. So they made it easier on themselves without, destroying the whole game by just making it Banjo-Kazooie.
Mm-hmm.
And thus, an iconic brand was born.
Yeah. I think copywriting is just hard in general, so it's not surprising to me that it happens throughout games history. I'm sure if you looked at other places too, you would find similar stories of like, man, copyright's hard.
Anyway, it set them up for perhaps the greatest sequel title of all time, Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah.
Which, man, silly sequel titles I feel like are gone, like, in, like, big games. Like, we don't see that anymore. And I think they should come back.
Me too. Even the third Banjo-Kazooie just has a subtitle. When there was apparently something in Banjo-Tooie that was like, it'll be called Banjo 3. And that sounds awful, but I still think they should have gone with it versus Nuts and Bolts, which just makes it sound like a Ratchet and Clank game.
It's like they're trying to fool you into thinking it's a Ratchet and Clank crossover.
Like, that is a subtitle of a Ratchet and Clank game, I'm sure.
Maybe they could have done, like, Trio Kazooie.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't love it, but just trying to come up with a workaround. Anyway, they didn't. So the game was a big success, right? The highest compliment you can get in this era is that people compared it favorably to Super Mario 64. That it was kind of an evolution of this brand new 3D platformer genre. And it sold a lot of copies. And it won some awards. So basically all you can hope for a game about a bear and a bird chasing after a witch. Yeah.
And an enduring enough series that despite not having a new game for 13 years now, it's in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
And has absolutely ruined my ability to make a mashup of this game. Oh, a fighting game where Banjo and Kazooie fight anime characters. Anime swordsmen. Oh, great.
You're right, it's just a Super Smash Bros. Match with Banjo-Kazooie and all the Fire Emblem characters.
Sakurai has been ruining. This is like the second one in like a couple months that's been like, it could just be Super Smash.
Damn you, Sakurai.
You getting your well-deserved rest. Posting about your cat. Dang you. Don't let them bring you back to make the just Banjo-Kazooie and Fire Emblem characters. Smash, please. But the game, the sequel is sort of notorious for a bit of cut content that was heavily promoted and then didn't actually happen. Namely, the stop and swap system. Did you read about this?
No. Tell us about it.
So this reminded me a lot. It's obviously very different because it would have been for the Nintendo 64 rather than a disc-based system like the PlayStation. But it operates on a sort of an idea of like you would do with like a Monster Rancher game. When is Monster Rancher coming out, by the way? I remember that being announced.
Oh yeah, I don't remember. I think early next year, maybe.
Okay, cool. On my list. Anyway. The idea being that if you 100%ed Banjo-Kazooie, so you got all of the items, like all of the collectibles, beat the game, you would get a special bonus cutscene that hinted at the existence of secret areas where there were a few like extra secret special items. And hinted that you would only be able to access them if you played Banjo-Tooie. And so sort of throughout the development period of Banjo-Tooie, they did a bunch of interviews and like features about this system where basically you would be able to return to these new areas in the original game if you were playing Banjo-Tooie with your cartridge in, and you got to the certain point where it like prompted you, and then you would switch out the cartridge and the N64's memory would like remember that you were just playing Banjo-Tooie, and it would unlock these areas for you. So kind of an interesting system, right? However, Nintendo's technical team had some concerns. Now, one of those concerns was that in 1999, so right between the 1998 and 2000 releases of Banjo-One and Banjo-Tooie, a 1E, a 2E, a 3E, that would have been quite good as a review title if it had been Banjo 3E, and it was not. Anyway, the N64 was got like a slightly new model between those time periods that took the amount of time that it would have that retained memory from 10 seconds, an eminently reasonable time to switch out a cartridge, to maybe 1 second. So they were very concerned about this being something that was consistently able to be done by players. Also some concerns about like the safety of pulling the cartridge out while the console was on and like what that was gonna be.
Yeah.
So in the end, despite all of that promo, they did not implement this system, and it became sort of this legendary piece of content that they made fun of in future releases of other games, for example. But finally, when they released the games on Xbox Live in like 2008, 2010 or so, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there, of course, they were finally able to implement the stop and swap functionality, because of course it's a lot easier when you're working with virtual games on the Xbox than if you're trying to have somebody switch cartridges out of their N64. But I thought it was interesting and showed a clear lack of communication with anyone at Nintendo who would have been like, I don't think so.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll probably never see another Banjo-Kazooie.
You think so? You think even though it's coming to Switch, that's not a teaser for a Banjo?
No.
On the floor?
I mean, I read some stuff about like Rare being put in the Kinect dungeon for a while.
Oh no.
After during that era of Xbox history, after they were acquired from Xbox, so there's a long period where they were doing like that sort of stuff. And then pretty much after they came out of that, they started working on Sea of Thieves, which is, a rather large and ongoing undertaking. In addition to like key staff that had worked on Banjo-Kazooie leaving and making stuff like Yooka-Laylee. So it just seems unlikely to me that Rare would be like, yeah, let's revisit Banjo-Kazooie, because they're a different company now.
It's such a shame for all of these beloved late 90s, early 2000s IPs that these companies evolved, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to the Jak and Daxter
that's
thing,
what I'm saying.
where it's like, like Naughty Dog's just a very different studio, and it seems unlikely to me that they would make another Jak and Daxter.
Oh, I think it would be hilarious if they did, though.
I do think it would be hilarious, yeah, but I don't think they will.
And then Banjo-Kazooie as pirates. I think that would be fine.
It goes back to Project Dreams again. The pirates, they're back.
Yep.
Like something real meta of it, I guess.
I'll mention
I could see another company doing like a remaster or a remake type thing, but I don't think Rare is going to be like, here's Banjo-Kazooie 4 at any time.
Well, we'll see, I guess. The power of nostalgia. It's a big thing.
It's true.
And I'm sure that they are at least watching this Switch Online thing closely. For that moolah moolah. Anyway, I do want to throw out there that while the Wikipedia page mentions that Banjo-Kazooie is occasionally included in best video games of all time lists, they do not seem to make the cut for Wikipedia's. So what's the frickin' point?
Yeah, you're right. Not on there. Doesn't deserve it.
So yeah, to wrap up, as Emma mentioned, like a bunch of people who were originally Banjo-Kazooie members moved and founded Playtonic, where they made spiritual successor to the game Yooka-Laylee, which is not, I'm not just saying the word ukulele, right? Look it up. As a crowdfunded game. I always sort of wonder, like, how, like, speaking of copyrights and trademarks, right? Like, I do always think it's interesting when kind of original team members of a different company go and found their own company and promptly make the same game that they were making at the old company. And, like, what the process is like for that, of, like, making sure that you aren't stepping on the IP.
I mean, as of yet, you can't trademark mechanics, although people have tried, so... I think as long as they're not stealing assets from their place of work, There's really nothing a company could do about it.
It just must make for awkward, coffee meetings with your former bosses.
I guess, but I imagine sometimes at least they're like, I'm, good for you.
Yeah.
I like to imagine at least.
Yeah, you hope.
Yeah.
Well, you've heard it here first, folks. Emma says Banjo-Kazooie is dead. So.
It's dead. It's gone. Kazooie is on your Thanksgiving dinner table. You ate her.
Still canonically unclear if Banjo and Kazooie are in a relationship, by the way. I read a couple disturbing interviews about it.
Were those real? I saw a couple of that, and I was like, this must be satire sites, right?
I don't know.
I did think it was funny that when you just search Banjo-Kazooie, one of the first, suggested Google questions is, are Banjo-Kazooie in a relationship? People want to know.
I'm glad that came up as one of yours. Sometimes I worry that my search suggestions, or somehow it's like Google has decided that, that's what I would think was interesting. So, for example, I was getting... Maybe it was for Guilty Gear, though, because it's we'll talk about why it's specifically geared toward this. But my Guilty Gear search results were is Guilty Gear good for beginners? Is Banjo-Kazooie good for beginners? And, I think both of those games are good for beginners, but I'm search history, are you doing this because I've been doing a lot of Googling, games for beginners, getting into games? And so then I worried. I was like, what have I searched that makes it think that I want to know if Banjo and Kazooie are in a relationship?
It just knows that you want to know.
Anyway, Emma has now said out loud that Kazooie is going to be cooked. So next time she looks at her computer, it's going to be recipes for wild game.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Replacements for turkey at your Thanksgiving. Alternate bird proteins. I'm a vegetarian. I would turn my nose up at Kazooie. Well, are we ready to punch into Guilty Gear Strive?
Guilty.
Hey!
I'm so funny.
So, Guilty Gear Strive came out in June of this year, June of 2021, although it was originally slated for spring 2020, one of the early pandemic-delayed games. And it's a fighting game from Arc System Works, commonly known as ArcSys, for the PlayStations, not 3, just PlayStation 4 and 5, and Windows. So suck it, Xbox.
Yeah, I guess so.
Guilty Gear, I'm going to say right up front, folks, as you probably already guessed from the beginning of this episode where I was like, was it Mortal Kombat or was it Tekken? That I am not a fighting game connoisseur. I feel like it's a very sort of specific type of gamer that is into fighting games, and then even more specifically than that, the type of gamer that is into each of the fighting games in particular. So it all sounds stupid when it's like, oh, okay, I guess I had sort of heard of Guilty Gear. I had no idea that this is the 25th game in the series.
I feel like that's a slight exaggeration.
Okay, it's the 7th mainline game. Still a lot. But there are a lot of Guilty Gears out there.
Yeah. Arc System Works in general is sort of just a fighting game company as well. That is sort of what they make, or at least are most known for. Especially they publish stuff too, but in their development they make a lot of fighting games.
Yes, they make a lot of Guilty Gear. Things. It's Blaze Blue, is that the other one?
Blaze Blue.
And then they also do a bunch of kind of licensed fighting game development.
Yes, they did one for Dragon Ball, and they did one for Grand Blue Fantasy recently.
So kind of unlike, obviously we're talking about how Rare has changed a lot since the 90s. Guilty Gear Strive is sort of a reimagining of the formula, but prior to that, what really was the hallmark of the Guilty Gear games was that they continued to iterate on the formula and add things to the kind of the roster of techniques and tools you have in the game. They did not change significantly. Unlike something like a Tekken or a Mortal Kombat that kind of shakes things up every new release. Which I say that as someone who's like, I would not have known that, right? So if you're sitting there being like, I thought all these games were the same, I kind of thought that too. But evidently, it's a hallmark of some of the more mainstream fighting games to kind of really shake up the control scheme and the moves every release. Guilty Gear was very much not that. Guilty Gear was catering to its audience of devoted Guilty Gear fans, and who would get better and better and better at the game each time.
Yeah. I will say what I knew Guilty Gear for, and ArcSys in general for, is in between Guilty Gear 2 and Guilty Gear Xrd, or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of there's these titles.
A gap in which they had some like rights issues with Guilty Gear, I believe. And during that time, they made BlazBlue so that they could, be working on things. And when they got Guilty Gear back and they could start developing again, they're like, oh, we made BlazBlue, which is a 2D anime style fighting game, and now we've got Guilty Gear back, which is a 2D anime style fighting game. What are we gonna do here? And one of their solutions was moving Guilty Gear to 3D, but specifically a kind of 3D that looks 2D until the camera moves, basically. So what I know ArcSys works for is their very particular 3D animation style, which just looks 2D, which they do. I've watched videos on it before, which they do basically by, like, perfectionism and brute force.
Oof.
It's really interesting, right? Looking at, like, how do you mimic, like, standard 2D animation with 3D? And a lot of it's like, well, you make the model, you use shaders and stuff, you make sure that it looks good, and then you don't use a lot of what 3D animation uses to make it look smooth. Like, you don't let it interpolate frames, which basically means, like, the computer will fill in frames in between, like, keyframes for you. So their characters just go from keyframe to keyframe to keyframe, basically, with nothing in between. And then they go in, and, like, the whole point of, like, these 3D models is so, like, they look the same all the time, right? You don't have to redraw them. But to make them look 2D, they go in and change the model on each keyframe so that it creates the maximum appeal, and it apes the imperfections of 2D animation so that it looks more 2D. Which is just like, what?
It's bizarre. Mind-bending.
And if you go look at stuff like the Guilty Gear, the Dragon Ball one, the Grand Blue one, you'll see what I mean. Like, it really does look 2D, except they have the benefit of being able to move the camera really freely to create, like, cinematic moments as well, which is something that's harder to do with 2D characters, obviously.
There's nowhere for the camera to move.
Yes. Well, you just have to redraw the character turning as opposed to,
Exactly. It's also known for being quite difficult.
Yeah.
Difficult to master. So because of that, and because the anime-style characters don't appeal to everyone, right?
Is the main character's name is Soul Bad Guy?
Correct.
So I don't know who this doesn't appeal to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and his antagonist is that man.
I know, it's so good!
Guilty Gear, you would not expect it. I mean, maybe you would expect this. I don't know. Fighting game people come and roast me on social media, okay? I just, like, as a casual, I did not expect a fighting game to have, like, dense lore.
I think that's actually not too uncommon. Just in terms of, like, these are all characters, right? And they all have, like when we've done episodes, I think, on, like, Mortal Kombat, and if you, like, go into, like, the wikis, like, characters have all this, like, backstory and stuff to them.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's too uncommon for that to be the case.
I guess, but I don't see too many articles being like, before you play Mortal Kombat, you should read the summary comics that they have on the website and maybe watch a story recap or two. And that's was true. In like every review for Guilty Gear Strive. They were like, it's a great story, but you should probably brush up on what's happened in the past 25 Guilty Gears and the pachinko machines and the arcade versions. Like, okay. It is sort of, they have an interesting take on story mode, Guilty Gear.
Yes. Strive in particular has a very ambitious story mode that did not quite come together super well.
Now, if you're someone who has played games, and look, we just did an episode on people who haven't played games, so maybe I shouldn't assume, but if you're someone who's played games, probably what you expect from a story mode, in a game that has probably what you expect from a story mode is, particularly in games like this that have multiple modes, you would expect that you're going to do some fighting in between some cutscenes. And, like, we're going to, like, shoehorn these fights into the cutscene story. And that is not what Guilty Gear Strive does.
No.
Instead, they give you a several hours long anime mini-movie.
Yeah.
Not even a mini-movie. Maxi movie.
Yeah, it's just like a series.
Yeah.
Like 5 hours worth of animated content. Apparently with just 4 credited animators, which goes a while to explaining why it looks that way.
Yikes.
So yeah, their story mode's really ambitious, but you can definitely see where, like, they don't have the manpower or experience to be doing a 5-hour animated series.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider, like, how I described they do, like, their fighting animations, which is going into each keyframe and manually changing it up, which is not something they could do for a 5-hour animated story.
No.
So you see a lot of rather awkward interpolation and obvious places where their lack of experience in, like, making animated film is coming, like their walk cycles do not look like they're walking on the ground, for instance. And there's just, like, notable holes where it's like, it's amazing that you made it with your experience and the manpower on it, but you can definitely see where their ambition overstepped their abilities.
That being said, almost every review I read was like, the story here is really good, and it's worth familiarizing yourself with to, like, understand.
Oh yeah, that's just the presentation, not necessarily the content.
No, but you would expect, right? Like, I don't know. I would expect, like, oh, if you don't even know how to handle the animation, like, the story's... I mean, the guy's name is Saul Bad Guy. Like...
That's a mark of a good story.
I mean, I know.
If you have the stones to name your main character Soul Bad Guy and his enemy That Man, that's a good story. I want it.
So, let me give just a teeny taste of the Guilty Gear story. I know what you're thinking, listener. It's a fighting game. Talk to me about the fighting. I will. But we need a tiny little Madelyn's lore corner. Now, what I'll say is, I was reading a lore summary on Destructoid, and I sort of felt like I'd gotten through a lot of lore, and then it went to the second character. And I was like, oh, how much more of this is there? And I was like, oh, there are like 12 characters with in-depth lore summary just on this page. So we're just going to give you kind of a summary of, like, the setup of the first Guilty Gear game from PlayStation, and we'll see if it hooks you, because I could not. There was just too much. There are summary comics on their website in both English and Japanese, so enjoy those, right? But here's the summary. The first one, by the way, came out in 1998 for PlayStation, so, take that. So then in 1999, so 1 year into the future of this first Guilty Gear, something happens to technology wherein it gets kind of, like, possessed by something evil, and so then all technology is banned, and we instead replace it with magic. So at this time, there's these 3 very brilliant scientists who are working on what's called the Gear Project. But one of them gets sick. 2 of them are in a relationship. The other one is That Man. The woman gets sick, and That Man decides to use the Gear project, which seems to be like a seeking immortality kind of project, to turn this dying woman and also her partner Frederick, the other scientist, immortal. So Frederick wakes up as a Gear, and he can't find the others, and thinks it's bad. He thinks the existence of Gears are bad. So he puts on a headband that's going to suppress his Gear cells. I don't really know what that means, but that's what it said. And he's going to get vengeance on that man for making him a Gear. And so he adopts the name Soul Bad Guy, and he aims to kill all the other Gears. Meanwhile, that man is working with the US government, of course he is, to turn the woman, Arya, into a super Gear called Justice. But Arya gets taken over by this same evil spirit that took over all technology, declares war on humanity, and then years more of lore follow that.
Soul Bad Guy.
It's pretty good. Soul Bad Guy also is voiced by the lead developer of the series.
So funny.
It's just like, good for you, dude. Take what you want, Ishiwatari.
The more recent Guilty Gears also feature English voice acting as well.
But why would you do that when you could listen to
the
creator?
Strive is the first one to credit the English voice actors, apparently. So
nice.
That's good.
So I mentioned, right, that Strive tied into our accessibility for new gamers episode from last week. And so you might be thinking right now, oh, that must be because it's so inaccessible, right? The series as a whole has built up both so much lore, right, but also so much mechanical history that it was very hard prior to Guilty Gear Strive to jump into this series. It had a kind of a core dedicated fan base that these games were made for, but if you didn't already have that kind of core competency, it was difficult to pick up the game because it was just a very steep learning curve to learn. However, for Guilty Gear Strive, ArcSys deliberately tried to make a game that was much more accessible to the fighting community in general. Now, of course, this all comes with a grain of salt of fighting games in general are not like the easiest games to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they sort of are, right? You can flail a bunch of buttons. But the reason that I have historically not enjoyed Super Smash Bros. That much is that it feels like you need to know all of these button combinations to be able to seriously play against anyone who has any experience with the game. And that's always been a roadblock for me with even the most casual of fighting game play. And that obviously in some ways still exists with this game, right? It's a fighting game, that learning curve is still there. However, they very much with this game tried to make it something that a new player could see how it would be fun, basically, playing as a newbie. So some of that, right, is they made it so normal attacks do more damage, right? So in the other games, like, you would have to do like a huge combo before you really did any significant damage. Of course, that's very hard, right? So they did that. They scaled back the way over the top anime characters, which apparently is alienating. I don't know. That I don't understand.
Did they scale them back that much?
That's what everything said, that like before their anime characters were so over the top in their designs and that they brought them back a little bit.
I guess so. I don't know. Soul Bad Guy does not look that much different to me.
Well, sure. Honest. I mean, you can't redesign Soul Bad Guy, but
I guess so. They're still pretty anime looking to me, so who knows how they looked before that.
Apparently the devs think they toned it down, so who knows? They also have made like themselves a series of videos, like starter guides on their YouTube, as well as those story comics. So
that's cute.
The team themselves is doing a lot of work for there to be outside of the game ways to learn the game, which I thought was interesting because you don't see like too much of that from within. So I thought that was cool. But they seem to have really walked this line really well. This game was very well received, both by, new players, in terms of there's a huge swell in the number of people streaming it, the number of people playing it concurrently on Steam. It looks like everything I said was reading was like from June, right? But at the time, it was on track easily to be the best-selling Guilty Gear game ever. But also, and man, I don't know how they managed to do this. This seems like freaking impossible to me. But they somehow managed to not really alienate the core fans. It's like,
impressive.
What a line to have walked.
Yeah.
Basically because although it's simpler to get into the game, there's still a lot to master. Basically, the impression I got is, because your attacks do more damage, either maybe it's more fun to play someone on your level, or like maybe you have a better shot at getting lucky and not feeling like you're getting crushed, or at the very least you lose faster.
That's fair. That's good. That feels good.
They also put a lot of work into really good netcode, which I can't say that I fully understand what that is.
So, I looked into this a little bit, and I still don't really understand what it is, but netcode in general is just a way of talking about, like, the way your network is set up. So when you're playing online, how do you ensure that there's a stable connection that feels good to the players playing online? So rollback, which I've heard a lot about but not really understood what it is, is a way that it treats both player inputs as local and then the opponents as the remote player at the same time. And rather than waiting for data to arrive, it attempts to predict what the opponent is going to do. And then if it's correct, it plays smoothly. And if it's incorrect, it can transition to the correct gameplay state without too much trouble. But basically, it tries to predict the motion so that the data can get to the player on the other side faster. And make things feel smoother even when there's lag issues.
God, what is the internet? I don't even... Will people one day understand what the internet is?
No. I wish I knew more about how this stuff worked. I feel like it's probably important to know, but just knowing, like, I can tell you what rollback is. I could not tell you how it works or why that makes it feel better at all.
That just seems like wildly complicated. Like, how is your code predicting what someone's next input is going to be? Like, what?
I think it's really predicting, like, almost, like, just small frames at a time. Not, like, it's predicting the whole next move that a player will do.
Okay.
It's, like, a little bit ahead of where your data is, basically. Okay. Not, like, a minute ahead of where you are or something.
Anyway,
like that.
I totally understand why that would be better than the traditional, like, delay-based version of online connection, but I don't understand how it would work at all. Anyway, this game has rollback netcode, which has been apparently something people have wanted for Guilty Gear for years, as kind of an upgrade. And now that they have it, online play evidently feels very good. People don't like the lobbies, but
who likes lobbies? I don't think anyone has figured out how to make a good lobby. Whenever, like, an online game comes out, I feel like there's at least one thing I see that's like, the lobbies are pretty bad. It's like, what are good lobbies? I don't think anyone's figured it out yet.
Literally, there is not one.
Yeah. I don't like waiting in real-life lobbies, so why would I like waiting in virtual lobbies, you know?
There you go. Hit the nail on the head. Anyway, if you're someone who's out there and you're like, Smash is dead now that they're done, Guilty Gear Strive might be the game for you. I did see some comments that were like, it's really popular right now because it hit kind of a dead zone in fighting game releases. So not only is it like a great step forward for the series, but it's not competing head-to-head against any kind of recent Mortal Kombat or Tekken or Marvel v. Capcom or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right place, right time with the right idea of how to get people to pick up your game if they've been skeptical about it in the past.
Yeah.
It's an interesting success story in really pivoting to appeal to a wider audience.
Well, shall we mash these games up?
You mean Super Smash these games up?
No.
Okay. How do you even do this? Like, it's like fighting game just feels like so core to any fighting game that I don't know how to get away from that. The mashup is Emma thinks that Banjo and Kazooie is dead, but they're actually just going to release a Banjo and Kazooie anime on Netflix.
Can you imagine?
Like a la Arcane. A la Castlevania.
Somehow I don't think it would work as well.
It's for children.
Oh, okay. Sure. No, what about, okay, so we can't take the Kazooie to the fighting game. What if we take the anime to the 3D platformer?
Okay. Everybody
so
loves when anime uses 3D stuff. Go ahead. Yeah, that's
video games do it plenty. Like not the way Arxis does, but there's tons of video games that have the aesthetic of anime that people like just fine, a la Persona.
You're right.
So,
I was just making a joke. Go ahead.
I know. But so we take the, there's not been a good like puzzle platformer, like a new one for a while. So we tap into the new Western love for anime that has had the industry booming, and we're like, okay, we're gonna take this aesthetic that the people like, and we're gonna bring back the 3D puzzle platformer. So you're hunting for the golden gears, let's say.
Okay.
Or whatever.
So
just as
like
a little homage.
Like we're doing a robo thing.
A robo thing?
If we're hunting for gears, this has got to be like a sci-fi vibe.
Sure. Yeah. Androids. People love androids. Nier Automata.
You're right. Okay.
They're making Nier Automata, but they're searching for golden gears, which they do by jumping on things and solving puzzles.
I think it's gotta be two characters working together, right? I know you're gonna say
sure.
that's what Nier Automata is, but somebody has to be in a backpack.
Yeah, it's true. It's like Pod, but on your back.
Okay.
So you have like little actual robot buddy and like on your back, and you're the android, the anime aesthetic android, going around collecting things in your sci-fi fantasy land.
Okay.
I don't have any idea for plot or anything. I've just taken the aesthetics and the mechanics and shoved them together.
Well, it's got to be some kind of a military-industrial complex dystopia, right? That seems to be like a theme of Guilty Gear, perhaps.
Sure, yeah.
So there's got to be kind of like an oppressive government, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
And you're part of a band of android, like, we can have like a group of friends, right?
Sure, yeah.
Who are...
To sort of bring more of like the fighting game idea, maybe you can play as a couple of different characters that have like different abilities.
Yeah, I like that.
Instance.
I like that. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this. It's like what I'm creating is Final Fantasy VII.
You are, yeah.
Which was not really like
I wasn't gonna say it.
I don't know where I got Final Fantasy VII from Banjo-Kazooie and Guilty Gear Strive, but
okay, but the key is it's not an RPG. Okay, it's a puzzle platformer.
Yeah.
So it's not Final Fantasy VII.
Good. Good, I'm glad that I didn't just create another game that already exists.
Is there another game that already exists?
No, I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
I was just worried. I was like, okay, my first idea was Super Smash, then I created Final Fantasy VII. It's not
I was thinking when I said you can play as multiple characters, I was like, Genshin.
No. It's like, what was I trying to... I just keep thinking about Barrett from Final Fantasy VII, and I get distracted. Like, Barrett with, like, Kazooie on his back. Powerful. Only it's, like, Aerith, like, strapped to his back.
Well, it can be his daughter, right? That's a good daddy-daughter Halloween costume.
No, can't make a dad. There's no dads in either of these games. It cannot be a dad game. Come on now.
I wasn't saying for the mashup. I was just saying for the Barrett with Kazooie.
You're right. No, but it's like, as opposed to it being an environmentalist thing, maybe it's like an it won't be like nuclear weapons. It'll be like whatever thing we invent that's like 10 times worse than a nuke.
Sure.
And we have to get the Guilty Gears to safely sabotage those weapons stores to avert catastrophic...
The copyright distinct Guilty Gears.
Correct. Lowercase g. Okay. Guilt-stained gears.
Sure.
We can make them whatever. They can be like they can be I was gonna say they can be ratchets, but they can't be ratchets either. That's worse. That's even closer to the genre. They can be like those horrible IKEA things that you have to do with like ready-made furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a collectibles thing in a cyberpunk. Nope. Not cyberpunk.
No.
I'm just like stepping in it everywhere I go in this sci-fi anime city.
Sure.
With lots of fun NPCs.
Yeah.
That'd be dope. I'd play that.
Yeah.
Kind of loses the fun of playing as a big bear, but that's okay.
One of them can wear a bear costume.
Okay, that's
very
good.
anime.
I like that. I hope I haven't just created Cowboy Bebop, though. Anyway, we'll forget about that.
Cowboy Bebop, the puzzle platformer, might actually work, to be perfectly honest. So
then I'll let the reviewers say that. I won't say it, but dressing someone up in a bear suit is part of that too, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we have an animal companion. Great.
That's just all anime have an animal companion.
I'll make it a Dachshund.
Like Disney movies.
You know? Just for long dog, but distinct.
Okay.
Well, cool. I think we've come up with something here. Thanks entirely to you and not at all to my contributions.
You came up with the story. It's good. I didn't have anything for that.
You had to stop me from creating Final Fantasy VII, so we'll give you story credit on this. Okay. Anyway, listeners, do you have fond childhood youth memories of playing Banjo-Kazooie? Would it be in your greatest games of all time list? Are you a fighting game connoisseur who wants to take me to task for all of the no doubt very uneducated things I said about Guilty Gear and what a fighting game is? We did not even really talk about, we assume that our listeners know what a fighting game is. So if you joined us last week and you were like, yes, a podcast that cares about new gamers, also,
it does sort of tell you in the name.
Yeah, but so does a Metroidvania.
No, it doesn't. Fighting's a real word, Madelyn.
Anyway, if you have thoughts on anything we talked about this episode, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog, featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend, plus a new blog from Emma on Lost Judgment. If you're looking for some light reading about why Lost Judgment falls short. I don't know, I haven't read it because I don't want to spoil the game. Emma always writes blogs on games that I will not play for another 9 months.
Sorry.
So, thanks. I'm sure it's good. I'll let you know next year.
It does have a spoiler warning at the top, so probably good.
But also, and most importantly, if you enjoy the show, If you're thankful for the show this Thanksgiving weekend, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. So next week, believe it or not, already is our 6 weeks in gaming.
I don't believe it.
I'm shocked. Get ready for me to recount blow by blow replays of every difficult Super Monkey Ball level that I have successfully beaten.
Looking forward to it.
And other things that we've been playing, probably. But 2 weeks from then, and Emma, we'll have to talk about the holiday Talk This schedule as we approach Game of the Year season. But 2 weeks from then, I think, is safe. What are we talking about in early mid-December?
For our old game, we are talking about Dino Crisis.
I can't say that I've heard of that game, but I'm excited.
And for our new game, we'll be talking about Eastward.
Cool. I have heard of Eastward. I'm having trouble remembering what game it's supposed to be like.
Earthbound?
What?
Earthbound?
Maybe.
That's always my guess.
I thought it was supposed to be like a Stardew Valley-like game, but I could be wrong.
I don't think so.
Well, watch for me embarrassing myself in 2 weeks when I talk about the wrong game on the show. Well, Emma, do you feel inspired with a sign-off this week?
Sure. This week, I hope you reinvent yourself and come up with a name as cool as Soul Bad Guy.